Hi, I am Dr. Sherri Mason. I go by Sam, so when you see me outside, please feel free to call me Sam. And I have just one word I want to say to you. Just one word: plastics. Since World War II, when the interest in infrastructure for the manufacture of plastic materials on a mass scale was put into place, the worldwide production of plastic has increased dramatically, essentially exponentially. Over the last 20 years, though, plastics have made their way from simply being a material which packages our consumer products to actually being incorporated within the products themselves. Many of the common personal care products we utilize every day contain microbeads, small particles of plastics designed to abrade or exfoliate the skin or even your teeth before being washed down the drain. Have you ever wondered what happens to those particles? In 2011, I started teaching a course aboard this beautiful vessel, the U.S. brig Niagara. Though I had lived along the shores of Lake Erie for 10 years at that point, I had never actually been out in the Great Lakes. While I was on board, I just had this simple question pop into my head, which is the way science happens, right? I wonder if there's plastic in these waters. So in 2012, my colleagues at the Five Gyres Institute and I set out to investigate. What we found was startling. As we followed the flow of water throughout the Great Lakes, the counts of plastic particles increased. In 2012, 90% of the plastic that we collected was within Lake Erie. Since Lake Erie flows into Lake Ontario, one might expect Lake Ontario counts to even be higher. In 2013, I was able to circumnavigate Lake Ontario, collecting plastic along the way, and found that this was in fact the case. Our highest count of plastic particles to date, 1.1 million plastic particles per square kilometer, and that was taken right outside of Toronto. While the counts of plastic particles within the Great Lakes are comparable or even higher to those within the world's oceans, that wasn't actually the most startling aspect of what we found. What was most surprising was the size. Within the world's oceans, most of the plastic is between 1 and 5 millimeters in size. But for us, almost 70% of the plastic that we found was in the smallest size classification, between 1/3 and 1 millimeter in diameter. Tiny. We were even further struck by the large number of multicolored, perfectly spherical little balls of plastic. Here we are looking at these under increasing magnification. Their size and perfectly spherical nature made us wonder about the source of these plastics, which brings us back to the microbeads I was talking about at the beginning. In the 1990s, manufacturers started producing personal care products with microbeads, plastic microbeads, instead of natural exfoliants like oatmeal or ground-up seeds. These plastics are actually included in the ingredient list for these products, so you can actually go home and look at your own products. You'll typically see words like polyethylene, polypropylene, or if you're talking about those bursting beads, polymethyl methacrylate. We took beads from some of these common consumer products and compared them to what we find in the Great Lakes and found them to be very comparable. So getting back to our opening question of what happens to these microbeads once we'd wash them down the drain, well, they go to a wastewater treatment plant. And we've done studies showing that they make their way through the wastewater treatment plant processing where they're discharged into a nearby body of water. That might be the Great Lakes directly, it might be a stream or river, but around here, all water flows to the Great Lakes, and that's where we find them. So why should we care? Well, these particles are so small that they look like fish food. We are just at the beginning stages of our food web assessment. But over the course of this past winter, we found on average 9 particles of plastic in every gastrointestinal tract of perch that we caught. For the record, they might be Canadian perch. We don't really know. It isn't really the plastic itself that's of concern, though. The bigger concern is the fact that the plastic acts like a sponge in the water, absorbing toxic chemicals. The Great Lakes are infamous for their chemical legacy, and our work has verified the fact that the plastics that we pull out of the Great Lakes have PCBs and PAHs absorbed onto the surface. These chemicals, for the record, are carcinogens. They're known to be mutagenic teratogens, which means that they not only affect the person who eats them, but generations down the line. So when plastic is ingested, those chemicals can get transferred into the food web, bioaccumulating up to the food web and into us. Whether you eat fish or not, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, we have to accept that we are water. 70% of our bodies are water. This physical form that seems to separate us from the outside, it's all an illusion. What we find out there is in here. If it's in the water, it's in us. Thank you.